Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Hello everyone. Today we're going to be looking at one of the recollections. Now there are different lists of these recollections or anussatis mentioned in the Visuddhimagga and also in the suttas. Typically when meditators start, they'll choose a meditation object from one of the more popular groups. For example, either metta or anapanasati, or maybe their practice mindfulness of four elements. But there are a wide variety of meditation objects that are not so commonly chosen, and some of them can have very uplifting effect on the mind. So a lot of meditators find that after a day of work, they come back and they don't feel their mind is very settled. Maybe they have only half hour or 1 hour to meditate a day, and the first part of that meditation is spent thinking about their day at work or their trouble with their children or their parents, etc. So this is very troublesome. Now, if you choose anapanasati as your meditation object, because it's a neutral object, if you're not that skilled in it, then the mind might not settle down right away. So if you choose a naturally uplifting meditation object, for example, recollection of the Buddha, Buddhanusati, in that case, then your mind might become happy right away. And this happiness, this wholesome happiness, can help to suppress these thoughts that you're having about the day, this sort of restlessness and sort of recurring, or you can say obsessive thoughts. One of these objects that is less popular than Buddhanusati, but it can be quite valuable, is Chāganusati, or recollection of generosity. Now, this is mentioned. There's quite a thorough section in the Visuddhimagga on this object, and I think I'm going to quote. I'll take that as the basis, and then we're going to look at a story from the Vinaya, a story of somebody who's managed to use this object of Chāganusati in her meditation. And then we're going to look at a sutta about generosity in general. That's something that will help us support this practice. So first let's start from the Visuddhimagga. So using the translation called Path of Purification, translated by English Venerable Nyanamoli, which is available online. One who wants to develop the recollection of generosity should be naturally devoted to generosity and the constant practice of giving and sharing. Or alternatively, if he is one who is starting the development of it, he should make the resolution, from now on, when there is anyone present to receive, I shall not even eat a single mouthful without having given a gift. And that very day he should give a gift by sharing according to his means and his ability with those who have distinguished qualities. When he has apprehended the sign in that, he should go into solitary retreat and recollect his own generosity in its special qualities of being from the stain of avarice, etc., as follows. So here, it's going to give the Visuddhimagga continues to give quite a detailed explanation of these stains, but essentially, if you want to recollect your own generosity, and the quality of Chāga is more than just generosity. Chāga has the sense of relinquishing and also the delighting in giving. Here, you have to develop this quality of generosity. So either you should be naturally generous, or if not naturally, perhaps you were raised in a generous family in your culture, perhaps, or your family, like your parents have have helped you train in that from a young age, or you have to determine to train in that. Otherwise, you won't have anything to rejoice in. Maybe you may feel regret when you try to practice this object. Then it gives these special qualities. And so there are a few different qualities it mentions here. One is that it's counteracting greed in our mind. Okay, I won't quote from it. Some of these are a bit technical. Other quotes is that this is like a good use of our fortunate life as a human. It's a good chance to make good karma. It leads to good fortune in the future. So in that we should that one who's developed this quality well will delight in relinquishing. They don't like to accumulate a lot of wealth, but they like to give away what they've attained, the wealth that they've gained. They're devoted to this. They're devoted to this aspect of giving away and supporting others. Okay, so then it explains how the concentration arises. This is in chapter 7, by the way, of the Visuddhimagga here. And in this translation, we're on page 221 now. As long as he recollects his own generosity in its special qualities of freedom from the stain of avarice, etc., in this way, on that occasion his mind is not obsessed by greed, or obsessed by hate, or obsessed by delusion. His mind has rectitude on that occasion, being inspired by generosity. So in other words, if you've developed this quality of generosity, and you reflect on it, then the hindrances will be suppressed. So when he has suppressed the hindrances in this way, already described, the jhana factors arise in a single consciousness moment. But owing to the profundity of the generosity's special qualities, or owing to his being occupied in recollecting the generosity's special qualities of many sorts, the jhana is only access and does not reach absorption. And so this is another important point to remember, that this meditation object does not lead to jhana. And the Visuddhimagga is actually a little bit of a difficult text to read. If you're not familiar with it, it's quite long, the language is technical, and you can miss some important points. So at the end of this section, this particular section on the meditation objects, it gives 6 recollections. There are actually more than 6, but this particular section only expounds on 6 of them. At the end of it, it mentions that if somebody wants to accomplish these fully, properly, they should be a noble person. They should have attained at least stream entry. And then it gives some quotes about how somebody who's at least a stream enterer, when they're practicing this meditation object, they'll get the proper result from it. And then, but at the end of the chapter, after all of that, it says, but ordinary people can practice this too. And so I'm going to read that section. This is right at the end of the section, after all of the 6 recollections, not the one on Chaganusati. So here it's on page 223 in this translation. Still, though this is so, this means they're meant for noble disciples of the Buddha. They can be brought to mind by an ordinary man too. Man meaning man or woman. And here it says it's talking about all 6 of these recollections. If he possesses the special qualities of purified virtue and the rest, for when he is recollecting the special qualities of the Buddha, etc., in this case, quality of generosity, even only according to hearsay, his consciousness settles down, by virtue of which the hindrances are suppressed. In his supreme gladness, he initiates insight, and he even attains to Arahantship, like the Elder Phussadeva, who dwelt at Kaþakandhakára. That venerable one, it seems, saw a figure of the enlightened one created by Mara. He thought, how good this appears, despite its having greed, hate, and delusion. What can the Blessed One's goodness have been like, for he was quite without greed, hate, and delusion? He acquired happiness with the Blessed One as object, and augmenting his insight, he reached to Arahantship. So that example is talking about Buddhanusati rather than Chaganusati, but its basic principle is the same. And once the concentration has been developed at this high level where the hindrances are suppressed, it can be used to develop the wisdom as well. It's actually a lot of information, I think. So let's have a look at somebody who actually developed this quality. And this is one of the Buddha's most excellent disciples. She is the most excellent female lay donor of the Buddha, and that her name is Visākhā. Visākhā appears in many places in the suttas and the Vinaya. She was the donor of Pubbārama. It is a monastery in Savatthi, and she was Anathapindika's counterpart in Savatthi, counterpart donor. Now, the story we're going to look at in the Vinaya, it occurs in the Vinaya Mahāvagga, and this is talking about the 8 requests of Visākhā. And so the story starts, Visākhā has invited the Buddha and the monks for a meal, and she sends her servant to go and collect them. However, this is in the rainy season. It's near the end of the rainy season, and there's a great rainstorm. In those days, they didn't have flowing water in the monasteries, so the Buddha has instructed the monks, there's not going to be more rain this season, so please go out and you can take a shower in the rain. And so the monks have done this. This would be a bit of a treat, right? Because it can be very hot in India. So they can go out and take a nice shower in the rain. They don't have to go down to the river. And when the servant from Visākhā came, she saw all of the monks not wearing any clothing, washing out in the rain, and she thought, oh, these are Niganthas, these are Jain ascetics. She came back to Visākhā and she said, oh, there aren't any monks to invite for dana today. There are only some Jain ascetics there. So Visākhā was wiser than that. She said, go back and invite them. Those were monks. So the servant went back the second time. And at that time, all the monks had gone into their kutis. And so the servant came back and she told Visākhā, there's no one there now to invite. Visākhā is very patient. She told her, go back a third time, please, and invite the monks. So the servant went, and this time the Buddha had told the monks, it's coming towards meal time, so please get your robes ready, robes and bowls, and we'll go for lunch at Visākha's place. So when the servant went, all the monks were ready, and she brought them back. Now at that time, they served the meal for the monks and the Buddha. After the meal, Visākhā came to the Buddha and she requested 8 things from him. She said, Bhante, I have 8 things to ask from you. So at first the Buddha refused. He said, no, Buddhas don't grant requests like that. You can't ask for 8 things. If you want to give a meal, you want to hear some Dhamma, that's okay, but we don't give gifts. We don't give some kind of special favors to people. Visākhā said, no, Bhante, these are wholesome things. Please listen to them. You'll like them. So the Buddha said, okay, please tell me, what are these 8 things? So the first thing she wants to give is rain's bathing cloths for the monks. So in that way, when the monks are bathing in the rain, they'll have something to cover themselves with, and their robes won't get wet. And then she would like to give. So these are permanent invitations that she's giving now. It's a bit technical the way in the Vinaya, in ancient times, that they arrange meals, etc. But one of the ways they could arrange them is a lay person could say, if you would like, you can send 3 people to my house every day for 3 months. You can send 3 monks to my house every day for 3 months or something. In this case, she's saying for these categories of monks or nuns, for my whole life, they can request these items. So she says for her whole life, she'd like to provide meals for monks who are arriving at the monastery. And then also for monks who are traveling away from the monastery. and she would like to give meals for monks who are sick. And in those days, of course, they didn't have hospitals in the same way we do these days. They would have had an attendant monk to help care for the sick monk, which is actually true in forest monasteries to this day. If the monk or nun doesn't require to go to the hospital, there'll be an attendant monk or nun there to help. So she'd like to give meals for those as attendants as well as medicine for the sick. And then she would like to give kanji for the morning. It's because in those days, the monks it was actually allowed to eat 2 meals, but typically a monk or nun would go on alms round in the village. They would bring the food back and they would eat it in one meal, in one sitting. The Buddha allowed them to eat it in 2 sittings if they went early, but typically either they would just take the 1 meal, or if some kind of kanji was available, they would take a cup of kanji. So she wants to offer kanji. And finally, she wants to offer bathing cloths for the nuns. She mentions these things, then the Buddha has asked her, why do you want to do this? And so I'll go through it very quickly. She gives detailed explanation, and there are some stories about for each one. But basically, she has this, we just heard the story why she wants to offer rains bathing cloths for the nuns, for the monks. And then she wants to offer meals for monks who are arriving at the monastery, because when they arrive at the monastery, they might be tired from traveling, and they might not have time to go on alms round before solar noon. So for their comfort, she would like to offer a meal for them. And then for monks departing from the monastery, those days they would have departed on foot. And so if they have to go on alms round to the village, and then after that to travel a long distance on foot would be very tiring for them. So to save that energy of going alms round to the village, she would like to offer food to departing monks. So offering food for the sick and for the attendant to the sick, typically the attendant for the sick would go on alms round for both of them. It's quite possible that they might not get enough food for 2, or they might not have time to get enough food for 2, or might not have enough time to eat the food. So for the benefit of both of them, she'd like to offer their meals. And of course, offering medicine for the sick is self-explanatory. She mentions a place where the Buddha has mentioned previously 10 benefits for taking kanji in the morning. And so some of the benefits of drinking kanji before the main meal is helping to help the digestion. So if you've ever eaten a large meal on an empty stomach, you might find that the stomach feels a bit uncomfortable, a bit bloated. And so one way to help alleviate this is to take some warm kanji a couple of hours before eating the main meal. So to this day, actually a lot of monks and nuns use this method. They won't take a full meal for breakfast, they'll just take some warm kanji, and then they'll take the larger meal at lunchtime. And finally, you can say for the dignity of the nuns when they're bathing in the river, she wants to offer bathing cloths. There's a story she mentions, an incident where some women have insulted the nuns. So all of these are reasonable. So she frames them as benefits the Buddha is giving to her, but actually, even though they are benefits for her, they're also benefits for the Sangha. But the Buddha doesn't agree yet. So he asks her, what does she see? What benefit is there for her when she does this? And so she explains that when she, at the end of the rains retreat, when the monks and nuns come to see the Buddha, or that time, if some monk or nun has passed away, they will ask the Buddha, did that person have any special attainment? Especially, had they any path and fruition knowledge? Were they a noble person, noble individual? So sometimes the Buddha might answer, yes, that monk or nun who passed away was an Arahant, or an Anagami, or a Sotapanna, or a Sakadagami, having one of these attainments. Now, if that's the case, she would ask, did that monk ever stay in Savatthi? So, if she had stayed in Savatthi, then she'll know, certainly, I've offered a meal, or I've offered a robe, or I've offered kanji or medicine to that monk or nun. And when she realizes that, she can reflect on her generosity, that she's been giving in this way for a long time, selflessly, in a systematic way, open-handed to any monk or nun who came. And because of this, she's made all of this merit. She's made these offerings to these noble disciples. And when she reflects on that, her mind will be uplifted. She'll become happy. Her body will become calm. And she will be able to enter into concentration easily. So the Buddha is very pleased by this answer. And he agrees. He says, okay, in this case, I will grant you these 8 favors. Even though we don't normally grant favors, I will grant you 8 favors. These 8 favors. And of course, because it's a Vinaya story, at the end he mentions to the monks and nuns that he allows these 8 things. So we started by talking about what this object is, Chaganusati, and we went through the Visuddhimagga explanation of how to develop it up to the level of Upachara Samadhi, and then a general exhortation that it can be used to develop insight afterwards as the basis for developing the insight meditation. And so we saw how Sister Visākhā has developed her generosity. And so she has actually cultivated this aspect of generosity as the Visuddhimagga recommends. And then she has taken her, she's used this to develop her concentration. So she's developed it, and then she's reflecting on her own generosity, and she's planning to, I guess you can say, she's planning to use it to develop her own concentration. Now, as she's a stream enterer, then she fits the category the Visuddhimagga mentions, where this object will naturally succeed. So you have the information now, but I think if I give some more examples, it will be easier to grasp how to practice this. So first of all, typically, meditators don't choose Chaganusati as their main meditation object. They might choose Anapanasati, or meditation on the breath, as their main meditation object. And they might spend a few minutes practicing Chaganusati at the start of their meditation session. Now, of course, you have to develop this quality of generosity before you can practice it, this meditation object. But if you already are giving alms regularly, or you're performing some kind of service, not necessarily for Buddhist monks or nuns, but maybe you make some donations for overseas aid, or you volunteer at a soup kitchen or something. After that, so you've developed this quality, then it's important to reflect on the benefits of generosity. And one way of doing this is to reflect on a sutta, because there are many suttas where the Buddha gives the benefits of generosity. So I'm just going to read one example sutta, and this is from the Anguttara Nikaya from the Fives, and it's sutta number 34, Asiha Sutta, and I'm going to read the translation by Bhikkhu Bodhi. You can choose a different sutta if you like, but it's helpful because the Visuddhimagga explanation of all of these things you're supposed to recollect regarding generosity is quite extensive, and it might not be easy to bring it to mind that way. But if you choose one of these suttas where they explain it in a bit more simple language, I think it might be easier to grasp. On one occasion, the Blessed One was dwelling at Vaisali, in the hall with the peaked roof in the great wood. Then Siha the general approached the Blessed One, paid homage to him, sat down to one side and said, "Is it possible, Bhante, to point out a directly visible fruit of giving?" "It is, Siha," the Blessed One said. "A donor, Siha. a munificent giver, is dear and agreeable to many people. This is a directly visible fruit of giving. Again, good persons resort to a donor, a munificent giver. This too is a directly visible fruit of giving. Again, a donor, a munificent giver, acquires a good reputation. This too is a directly visible fruit of giving. Again, whatever assembly a donor, a munificent giver approaches, whether of Khatiyas, Brahmins, householders, or ascetics, he approaches it confidently and composed. This too is a directly visible fruit of giving. Again, with the breakup of the body, after death, a donor, a munificent giver, is reborn in a good destination, in a heavenly world. This is a fruit of giving pertaining to future lives. When this was said, Siha the General said to the Blessed One, Bhante, I do not go by faith in the Blessed One concerning these 4 directly visible fruits of giving declared by him. I know them too. So he knows, he reiterates that he understands these first 4 benefits. In the 5th one, he says that he goes by faith in the Blessed One. And so then the Buddha reaffirms that what he has said is correct, that there is this benefit in future lives. So if you're taking this Chaganasati as your object, you can become quite familiar with a short sutta like this, the five directly visible fruits of giving. And then you can reflect on these fruits. And then it's important to have some kind of examples of your own giving that you can recollect. So even though you've been generous for a long time, if you just think to yourself, I've been generous for a long time, maybe that's not enough. So like Sister Visākhā, she knows she's been generous for a long time, but if she remembers she's given something to Arahant Mahakassapa or something, at that time, the happiness will arise more easily. In the same way, if you can recollect a time where you were generous and you were very happy about that, maybe you were in Bodh Gaya and you offered a robe at the Mahabodhi tree or something, or maybe you offered, in Sri Lanka, some people will offer food for all the patients at a cancer hospital. This is quite common actually. They'll do this on the anniversary of a relative passing away. If you've done some kind of dana like this that you're proud of, you can collect 3 or 4 or 5 things like this that you've done, and then you can recollect them. So you recollect the qualities of giving, and then you know that you have these qualities of delighting in giving, and then recollect from these 4 or 5, choose one of them that makes you happy, and you can focus on that, maybe like an image that represents that. And then you can think to yourself, sadhu, sadhu, like that, recollecting this quality of giving, but just sort of focusing that on this anumodana for yourself, your own good quality there. And so typically the meditator might do this, as I said, for 5 minutes or 10 minutes before the main meditation session, and hopefully it helps to bring some happiness that maybe act as a support for your meditation. So I wish that you may all be able to develop these qualities, the quality of generosity, the quality to recollect your generosity, develop concentration, and that you may be happy, healthy, peaceful and content, and swiftly attain the peace of Nibbana. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.